The business of Africa is informed very much by the notion or the new narrative of Africa rising. And to really speak to this point, in 2015, Africa is going to undergo a number of changes, really built on the last 10 years, a decade of growth, which has been by and large 2% above global average. Now, Africa in 2015 will look very, very different to how it has looked over the past 5 years or so. We are seeing a drop in commodity prices and a plummeting of the price of oil, which is going to have a major impact on many leading African economies and on knock-on industries in those markets. Some of those markets include Nigeria, perhaps Ghana, certainly Angola, and even some of those on the eastern seaboard. To speak to this point, Nigeria's growth this year will probably drop from around 7.5% to below 5%. Now that begs the question, what are the opportunities in Nigeria if we're going to see slower growth? And to really answer that, we have to look at the diversity of the Nigerian economy. Now, the Nigerian economy has diversified somewhat from predominantly or just purely oil and gas. We are seeing higher consumerism, so the life of FMCGs, which are those fast-moving consumer goods, and retail is going to be a big story in Nigeria, along with other commodities like agriculture and some of the metals and minerals. Services are going to play a big part in Nigeria and in other African markets as well. And we've seen the services, and especially the services that are offered by South African companies, come to the fore in this new rise in Africa narrative. Services in East Africa, while East Africa right now has got a thriving ICT sector, one that we could actually look at replicating here in South Africa, we have got other services that can be exported to those markets. In short, while the African market and while the overall African economy might be slowing somewhat in 2015, there are an abundance of opportunities that can be engaged on or can be pursued by South African companies and companies across the globe. There are opportunities with other companies. There are joint ventures that can be looked at. There are sectors that have not been explored, and there are areas of the continent that are yet to be engaged with. The business of Africa here at GIBS looks at delving into these markets, looking at these in a much more constructive fashion, and to identify which sectors, which companies, and really which opportunities are now coming to the fore in this change in African story. One of the areas that we will look at on the business of Africa is, for example, in Kenya, the ICT sector, as I mentioned. We will be visiting the iHub, which is often called Silicon Savannah, which is really a replica of the Silicon Valley on the west coast of the United States. We'll also again be looking at retail in East Africa, and not really just in Kenya. While we will be visiting Nairobi and Kenya in general, the retail sector in East Africa is one that is very, very integrated, given the fact that the East African community is the most connected sub-region on the continent. Just as a bit of a sidebar, East Africa this year should be the fastest growing sub-region on the continent. Now, looking across the continent to West Africa again and looking at Nigeria, despite Nigeria's dropping growth rates this year, Nigeria, as the largest economy in Africa, which surpassed South Africa last year, simply cannot be ignored. With a population of around 185 million people, a GDP that is now far larger than that of South Africa, and still favorable growth rates, this is a market that companies from South Africa, from Europe, and from the United States simply have to engage with and have to look at in terms of their entry strategies and engagement with the rest of the continent. With that, and with the insights that we have presented, the business of Africa really does provide the ideal platform for you to engage with and to enter African markets.